When I was a teenager, they coined the term generation gap. It was to describe this divide between my baby boomer generation and my parents' generation, which were known as the silent generation or the greatest generation. Of course, when I was a teenager, they didn't seem like the silent generation or the greatest generation. I've since radically changed my mind. But I think about how my father grew up and my mother grew up in the Great Depression, and then they spent their late teens and early 20s in World War II. I, on the other hand, spent my teenage years surfing and trying to relive Woodstock. Well, it's sort of happening again. We've got 10,000 baby boomers a day moving into retirement age. And filling that gap is another generation, the millennials that grew up in a much different world. Hello, I'm Eric Wright, along with my friend and colleague, Jim Thomas of the Orlando Tech Association. And we're here to unpack some subjects and some issues that are concerned to leaders, business people, and especially to entrepreneurs. And today we're talking about a very crucial one, millennials and baby boomers and bridging the gap. So, Jim, you have this opportunity to observe this on a daily basis in your sphere of influence and responsibility. And what can you tell us about how the best way to sort of, mind the gap is?
It's funny that this is happening all over again, because the language that we use today is, this is something that's just unique to this generation. And, this has happened throughout eons. And I think it's when it's two generations divided. There's that gap between the middle, just like you're saying, because we do grow up so different, because technology changes and society changes. And I think the biggest thing that we need to do these days is just to listen to each other and to not project, wait, that's not how I did it as a kid.
Or that's not the right way.
That's not the right way. Just to take that step back and really listen and say, like, why is somebody doing what they're doing?
It's really like two people growing up in a different culture.
Right.
Well, if I meet someone that grew up in South America, Africa, and the Orient, I automatically recognize, hey, they've got a different life paradigm than I do. But if you grow up in the same house, you're going like, wait a minute, what is the disconnect here? Right. But what you're talking about really described it. So what can we do about that? Let's sort of start with the millennial perspective, looking at the baby boomers. What can they do to bridge the gap?
Right. I think that the millennials have grown up with access to information. They've grown up with access to people. Like, if you want to get in contact with somebody, there they are. And the older generation, what they didn't see, they had to wait their turn.
Yeah.
Right? They had to say, like, how do I get in touch with the CEO?
Right.
How do I work? Maybe one day I'll be able to get connected with that person. And that, to me, that's the biggest thing is why millennials these days don't want to wait. And I think that the baby boomer generation wants
them
patience.
to wait.
they want them to wait, right?
Right.
Wait your turn. I had to wait my turn. Wait your turn. And now we're in this instant, automatic, always on generation. And to me, that's where the biggest disconnect is.
That's very interesting, Jim, how we tend to project our experience onto others and other generations. And we sort of want them to pay the dues that we paid. Well, you're playing a different game, and so there is no waiting on the batter's box. You're waiting on the sidelines to go in, and you can go in anytime. You don't have to wait for an inning change or whatever. Right. So it's a completely different game. Conversely, from the baby boomer perspective, looking at the millennial, how can they navigate these waters that are somewhat new to them, unexpected?
I think it's the same thing. It's realizing that times have changed. It's realizing that we are connected in a whole different way these days. It's realizing that we should understand it a little bit from that millennial perspective. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I would suggest to baby boomers is to adopt a little bit more of that millennial mindset and to be a little more instant on. You can get onto social networks these days and connect with anybody you want. You can build those communities. And so I think the baby boomers would be more satisfied or happier if they do reach out and connect with those type of communities.
You know, it's interesting, Jim. The thing that came to my mind was, I remember when I had a technological challenge. I always look for a millennial to help me out,
Right.
and I still do.
Right.
The millennials in my office, you know, they're the ones that I go to if I have a concern about technology. And the thing is, they're savvy. They understand the realities of the workplace and how it's changing and why it's changing and where it's going much better than we do. It's almost like we're not really the prophets of the future. They're more the prophets of the future. And unless we understand how to communicate to them, you know, we're going to be out. And why else? You know, for the person that's out there saying, well, why does this really matter to me? And why does it matter in my business? What would you say to them?
Well, I think first of all, it's your customer base, right? It's who are you connecting with, first of all, and are you a boomer trying to sell to a millennial generation, or are you a millennial trying to sell to the boomer generation? So it matters tremendously in your approach and how you really connect with people and how you really communicate that message. And so you have to be very cognizant of that. I think it's kind of fun. I actually fall into Generation X, and I've always considered this is like the way that I'm kind of the bridge. I think of
you're the ambassador.
The X is the like, well, let me, you know, I'm the interpreter. I go, well, let me explain where they're coming from. And actually, it's meant a lot of success for me because I think a lot of times the baby boomers haven't wanted to hand over the keys to the castle to the millennials. They feel a little uncomfortable about that.
Sure.
But they go, oh, okay, somebody who speaks both of these languages, let me hand the keys to this Gen X generation. The sad part is there's so few actually in the Gen X generation that it creates this real gap and divide.
Well, you know, you had the spike, which was the baby boomer, and then it went down.
Right.
And there was another spike, and it's the millennial generation. Right. And the interesting thing about the millennial generation, it wasn't just a birthing of more children. It's the influx of children and now young adults from other countries and other cultures that are making up this millennial population. And so, you know, this idea of thinking globally, one of the things that came to my mind was I remember studying history and how Franklin Delano Roosevelt understood the power of radio. So he did these fireside chats that captured, you know, that whole generation and brought him right into his living room. And then when Richard Nixon ran against John F. Kennedy, Kennedy understood the power of television. Nixon, that first go round, did not, and it cost him the election. And we're really facing the same sort of thing, and not just politically, but also in the marketplace. So, Jim, to conclude our conversation today, if you were talking to millennials or you were talking to baby boomers, what can they practically do? What could they do in the next 3 days to help them understand this phenomena and how to navigate the waters?
I think having a real conversation, sitting down, making sure that you are sitting not just with a parent or grandparent, but somebody that is not of your generation, and really talking about this. Ask it for a millennial to say, how did you grow up? What was it like when you were a kid? And just to talk about the flow of information back and forth.
And not act too shocked, you know?
What? You had cars
You
back
didn't
then?
have that?
Yeah, right, exactly. But then it's the same way. I see too often that the baby boomers get nervous about social media or going online or even creating a video where in a second, a millennial will pull it out, they'll take a selfie, they'll do a video and put it right on there, and they'll think, I would rather do this and not have it not be perfect. Whereas the boomer generation goes, I'm so scared of messing this up, I'm gonna not act.
Right.
And so there's a bridge between those two. And I think if you take both mindsets and really put them together, that's where you're going to see the most success.
That's just amazing, amazing insight, Jim. I can't thank you enough, and I want to thank you for joining us today on this TREP Talk. You know, in a relay race, and I'm sure that you've seen relay races in the Olympics, the most critical point in a relay race, no matter how good the athletes are that are competing, the critical moment of those few seconds where the baton is being exchanged. That's where gold medals are won and gold medals are lost. And we're at that place in our culture right now where that baton exchange is going on every single day. And whether you realize it or not, you're a part of that exchange and you need to be part of that conversation. For more information on this and other subjects, please go to our website, trepfreedom.com, and please join us next time for the next TREP Talk.